From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, it's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. Hey, calling all lefties today. We got to have a little caucus, lefties. I found the most tremendous opinion piece that I'm going to share with you. And it's tremendous because I agree with it. You know how that works. But it just really fits so nicely into my credo. If I find someone who articulates the message far better than I ever could, I want to shine some light on that person. And that person today is Mehdi Hasan, host of the Mehdi Hasan Show on Peacock and an MSNBC political analyst. He's also a former senior columnist for The Intercept and launched their Deconstructed podcast. So that's a nice little bio. Pretty good cred. And he writes about something I've wanted to talk with you about for a while, and that is how we feel about Joe in the first week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. How long has it been? So I want to share this with you from Mehdi Hasan and then toss in my 2 cents. Reading now. I have a confession to make. During the Democratic presidential primaries, I was one of then presidential candidate Joe Biden's fiercest critics on the left. I reminded readers how he was the architect of the 1994 crime bill. I reminded listeners how he was the champion of the credit card industry. I reminded viewers how he had misled us over Iraq. Yep, I'm totally with him on the first paragraph. I was right there with him. The former vice president, I warned, would be a disaster. Actually, he writes, the former vice president I averred. I don't even know what that word means. I've never used that word. Averred? A-V-E-R-R-E-D? Okay, you're smarter than I am. You've heard that word. You've used that word. Right now you're saying, Charles Purcell, you dummy. I'm not familiar with that. Anyway, the former vice president, I warned, would be a disaster. Well, maybe, perhaps, I was wrong, he writes. There, I said it. The new president has been far from a disaster. His first 10 days were as smooth as any in modern presidential history, and that despite perhaps the worst presidential inheritance in all of American history. And he doesn't elaborate, but I'm guessing he means not only the policies that were left behind by the Orange Menace, the condition of the country, but I assume he's also referring to, unquestionably, the worst transition period in modern history. The Orange Menace administration didn't only not cooperate with the incoming Biden administration, in some cases, in many cases, they attempted active, deliberate sabotage. So, yeah, this was a pretty tough lift right from day one, that infamous day one. All right, continuing. He, Biden, that is, has signed more than 40 executive orders. Well, let's see, that's up to closer to 50 now. Let's see, this was written February 1st, so in the last couple days, you can add to that. He signed more than 40 executive orders, an opening day's blitz, essentially compressing 100 days into 10, to quote the New York Times. Biden has outlined the most liberal agenda in a generation, Axios observed Sunday. By the way, we're always talking media on this program. Axios has really turned into something here in the last couple of years. Oh my goodness. You got to check out their 77 Days series. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, just search Axios 77 Days. They've got a series of articles and a podcast with incredible reporting on the lead up to January 6th. Really something. Okay, back to this. Forget Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene for a moment. All right, while we're here, I'll tell you that the latest I know, last night, Kevin McCarthy, House Minority Leader, did have that so-called conversation with crazy lady from Georgia. And unless there have been other developments I don't know about, the last I heard, he said, yes, we spoke, and I told her that we must have higher standards now that we're U.S. representatives, and she agreed. And that was about it. So, in other words, nothing. All right, back to Hasan. Take a break from counting down the days till the Trump trial in the Senate and cast your eye over Biden's first 10 days of orders, proclamations, announcements, and bills. What's not to like for progressives? And this is what today is all about. I've been asking the lefties to take a breath. I've been reminding myself. So this opinion piece just really says it all. Starting with climate change. Climate change? Biden rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement, canceled the Keystone XL pipeline, ordered the conservation of around 30% of all federal land and water by 2030, and the suspension of new oil and gas leases on federal land and water. Established a White House Office of Domestic Climate Policy, led by the first national climate advisor, and made climate change a national security and foreign policy priority. By the way, I'm sharing this as I always do, major articles I discuss. I'm sharing it on the Facebook page, so go to the Charles Purcell Facebook page. And I mention that now because I'm noticing there are just multitudes, many links included in this article. So if you want to go into detail about anything on this, he's got dozens and dozens of links. It's fantastic. Spending. When he began his presidency, Barack Obama told a White House summit on fiscal responsibility, quote, "We cannot and will not sustain deficits like these without end. We cannot simply spend as we please." Biden began his by telling reporters, quote, "Every major economist thinks we should be investing in deficit spending in order to generate economic growth." Yeah, right out loud. No apologies. Joe is getting it done. Let's continue. The times they are a-changin'. In 2009, Obama's chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, told Obama there was no effing way any number that began with a T could be put in front of Congress. In 2021, Biden's chief of staff, Ron Klain, conceded the Obama stimulus wasn't large enough. It didn't do all the things we needed it to do, and our recovery lagged as a result. By the way, this is a sentiment, an opinion that is now gospel on the entire Democratic side, maybe with the exception of Joe Manchin. I don't know. We might even have him at this point. But this is just an accepted fact now. Not by the lefties, not by the radicals, but by every Democrat in office, that the Obama stimulus was not enough, and that's why the recovery was so damn slow. And then the Republicans, of course, used that as political fodder. Oh, look, this is the slowest recovery ever. Because Obama conceded, gave in to the Republicans, and watered down the stimulus. As large as it was, it's now agreed by the whole Democratic establishment and liberal economists that it was too small. And they've learned that lesson. They're not going to do it again. Now, you've heard this over the last week or so from all the pundits. I'm not telling you anything unique or new here. But I just want to point out that for us lefties, it's no time to dance in the streets, but we should be humming a little happy tune at this point, at least, softly into our pillows at night. In the shower where nobody can hear you. We lefties, we don't like being happy. We like complaining. We like hollering. But here we are. We just have to enjoy this moment. Klain, reading again, Klain and his colleagues in the Biden White House are now pushing for a COVID-19 relief bill worth $1.9 trillion. Well, of course, we all know that. Joe, in the last couple of days, has made noises about he's willing to go down on that number. He just said last night, I'm not married to $1.9 trillion. I'm not married to the figure. So a little scary, but right in the same breath, he says we're going big. So if it goes from 1.9 to 1.7 or 1.6, we still got what we need. By the way, did you see the alternative offered by the Republicans on the stimulus checks, which should be $2,000? So that's something to complain about if you really want to get your complaining regimen in every day. Complain that the stimulus checks went from $2,000 as promised down to $1,600 without hardly a word. No, excuse me, $1,400. Right, $1,400. because they say, well, you got the 600 in December, so 600, 1400 equals 2000. That's no. The whole thing after the December bill was passed, that everybody kept saying 2000, 2000. The whole Georgia election became about 2000. That was the number. That was everybody's number. Remember, the Orange Menace wanted 2000. Half of the sycophants who have to go along with the Orange Menace wanted 2000. And all of a sudden it's 1400. So there. You need to get your complaining in for the day. We lefties, we have little complainer Fitbits. There's complainer bits that we wear on our wrists. It counts our complaining for the day. We have to get in our allotment. But the Republicans took it down to 1,000. Is that right? Yeah, and they took the threshold down to 40,000 a year. So, just not even in the same ballpark. And here again, I'm not sure exactly what happens later today. By the time you hear this, maybe there's some new news. But it really looks like they're not only going big, but the Democrats have also made the decision. Republicans, if you want to come along, if you want to vote with us, you're very welcome to do that. And we might even make a couple of small concessions for you. Small. Again, we've learned our lesson. But if you don't, we're going it alone, and we're fine with that. They've already begun the procedure. I'm not going to pretend to know all the mechanism that goes into this. Apparently, it's a whole big thing to get to reconciliation. And by now, I hope all of us knows what that means. On budget-related items, and I think there are limits. You can only do one per session or something like that. But you can designate a bill to be passed through reconciliation, which means you only need the 51 simple majority, which the Democrats have, as long as Joe Manchin doesn't play a power trip, which, we got to worry about that for the next how many years. So they're not only going big, they've already indicated and have already begun the legislative process to go it alone without a single Republican, which I'm guessing, if I'm here to make predictions, that's the way it's going to go. Not one single Republican vote. All right, back to Mehdi Hasan, opinion writer for MSNBC. On the topic of immigration, the Obama administration was accused of deporting a record number of migrants. On day one of his presidency, Biden ended the Muslim ban, canceled construction of the border wall, included undocumented immigrants in the census count, blocked the deportation of Liberian refugees, issued a memo, quote, preserving and fortifying the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, DACA, shielding 650,000 immigrants from deportation, and announced a 100-day moratorium on all deportations. That has been blocked by a judge, a Trump-appointed judge. We'll see where that goes. He also sent a bill to Congress offering a pathway to citizenship for around 11 million undocumented migrants and officially revoked the Trump administration's zero-tolerance family separation policy at the border. And in just the couple of days since this opinion piece was written, Joe Biden has taken that one step further. Now, some of us were disappointed because he said on day one we're going to reunite families. Well, come on, you guys. It's not that simple. It's very difficult. It's very complicated. And again, zero transition, less than zero in some cases, actual sabotage of the transition. So he's doing something that I know it's going to make you roll your eyes. This is the kind of thing I roll my eyes at all the time. Setting up a commission. I know, boo. But no. Listen. This commission has a task to reunite families. Figure out how to do it now. You have exactly 120 days. This commission has been given a deadline. And the commission exists not just of little think tank guys or CEOs who are owed a favor from the campaign. No, this commission is the Attorney General of the United States, the head of Homeland Security. The top officials in American government are tasked with the mandate to get these families together. Figure it out. Let's do it. Lefties, we got to be happy today. Next on his list here, racism. Rescinding the Muslim ban was a major blow to institutionalized racism and Islamophobia. On his first day as president, though, Biden also rescinded the Trump administration's offensive counterfactual 1776 Commission and its harmful ban on diversity and sensitivity training, while ordering federal agencies to conduct racial equity assessments and target, quote, systemic racism. He has signed an executive order explicitly combating racism, xenophobia, and intolerance against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Now, there again, that has a whiff of aspirational language, maybe a little kick the can, more studies and commissions and such. But you know what? Outside of just announcing reparations on day one, what can you do in the first week? And the 1776 Commission that the Orange Menace set up, we never talked about this, I don't think. I read quite a lot about it, but I don't think you and I ever spoke about it. This was a response to the 1619 Project, which was this really immense project by the New York Times by a woman named Nicole Hannah-Jones and a bunch of writers from the New York Times and New York Times Magazine about putting Black American history into focus from the first slave trade on to today. And so it's this great multimedia journalistic project and packages for schools, and it was really quite remarkable. And it lives today in many ways. And the conservatives, Republicans, just went nuts. Oh, revisionist history, white people are bad. Of course, all the criticism was sort of ridiculous. And it played exactly into the Orange Menace's hands because racism. So he has his little buddies slap together the 1776 program, in which they sought to reestablish and carve in stone forever the whitewashed history of America that we all learned in school. America is this great and wonderful purveyor of freedom. So the 1776 Project was basically a white supremacist, jingoistic, patriarchal set of ideas modeled after the 1619 Project, designed specifically to rebut the 1619 Project and make it official government policy and put it into schools, into curriculum. And they would teach it in Texas schools right alongside intelligent design. So there, we've spoken about it. You and I never really talked about that. And so since the 1776 Commission was instigated, devised, and designed within the confines of Trump and his buddies, it didn't have any input of Congress. It certainly wasn't a law in any stretch of the imagination. It was just this dreamy little project enacted with the Orange Menace's big, dopey Sharpie signature. So Joe can just sit down at his little desk and say, nope, no more. Now, this is a good time to mention, and again, I'm not going to be very original here. You've heard this before. The executive order is no way to run a nation. Nobody thinks it's a great idea. Nobody's jumping up and down about executive orders. Joe himself said earlier this week, I'm not making any great law here. I'm just rescinding bad policies. Which much of what he's doing is like this. This is the perfect example, this stupid 1776 Commission. So Joe's not trying to fool anybody. Joe's not fooling himself. He knows that it's going to take a lot more than executive orders to get this ship turned around. But he also knows the truth, and that is that these executive orders can and do crush, rescind, deny, reverse horrible, horrible policies from the Orange Menace. Now, the Orange Menace didn't do 40 EOs in the first 10 days. But over his 4 years, he did a couple, I don't know how many, a couple hundred at least. Every one worse than the last. So Janitor Joe had a lot to clean up here, walking through the door. He had garbage and muck to wade through just to get himself to the Resolute desk. So if you're concerned about executive orders, don't be. He knows what he's doing. Everybody's on the same page. Nobody thinks that they're more than they are. He's got exactly the right attitude. He's sitting down and signing them like Mookie Wilson at a baseball card show. And that's fine. That's great. Next topic, criminal justice reform. Biden barred the Department of Justice from renewing private prison contracts, calling it a first step to stop corporations from profiting off incarceration. I will jump in to say we have a long way to go. We have a long way to go on that one. But that is a very good small first step. According to NBC News, the Biden White House has asked senators to recruit civil rights attorneys and defense lawyers for judgeships. I love this one. It's also worth noting that the president chose not to include Rahm Emanuel of Laquan McDonald murder cover-up infamy in his cabinet. Not a fan. Not a fan of Rahm Emanuel, and he has been frozen out of the Biden administration. These are the kinds of details that have to just put a big old smile on your face. I mean, that's fantastic. Next topic here, workers' rights. Biden ordered the Department of Labor to develop plans to ensure a $15 an hour minimum wage for federal employees. That's in the current COVID bill. It might not make it through to the final version. The president also asked the department to clarify rules establishing that workers have a federally guaranteed right to refuse employment that will jeopardize their health while still qualifying for unemployment insurance. We've been saying this on this program here since the very beginning, for almost a year. No person should be forced into a job that threatens their life. If they want to do it, we thank them. If you want to do a job that's an essential service, if you want to do a job that puts your life at risk because it helps the rest of us, then you're a hero. Thank you. You should be very, very well paid. But if you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing to put your own life or your family's life at risk, you should still be able to get unemployment insurance. We've been saying this for a year. I'll tell you the truth. I didn't hear anybody else saying it. Maybe Joe was listening to our podcast. Maybe. But this has been our position here from the very beginning. You can't deny someone unemployment insurance, effectively forcing them into work that endangers their lives. You just can't do that. So, this is included in Joe's Little Desk executive orders. He's having his own private Tiny Desk concert here, and we're loving it. We're grooving on Joe's Tiny Desk concert. Foreign policy. The Biden administration announced its intention to renew U.S. relations with the Palestinian leadership, oh my God, and Palestinian people. Talk about a complete abandonment by the Orange Menace administration. Palestinians were just completely off the map. We care nothing for you. You are just nothing to us. Just reprehensible. Joe will reopen the Palestine Liberation Organization mission in Washington, D.C. The president ignored right-wing Republican hawks like Senator Tom Cotton and appointed the dovish Robert Malley as the U.S. Special Envoy to Iran. And while we're on foreign policy here, it's been in the news just the last couple days. Russia is getting harsh words, if nothing else at the moment, but at least they're not getting love letters and late-night phone calls from the White House anymore, especially with the whole Navalny situation. Nuclear treaties are getting the attention they deserve. Reading again. His new director of national intelligence, Avril Haines, agreed during her confirmation hearings to release an unclassified government report on who was behind the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Perhaps above all else, Biden ordered a pause on weapons sales to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates that had been agreed to by the Trump administration. Lefties. We're reading an article, an opinion piece from Mehdi Hassan, MSNBC opinion columnist, on why we need to applaud the Biden agenda. For the time being, we're not going to get overly excited here. All right, let's finish this up. Do Biden's slew of executive orders go far enough? Of course not. especially if the 46th president wants to live up to the example of the 32nd Franklin Roosevelt, whose portrait now sits above the mantel of the Oval Office fireplace. Should Biden, for example, go beyond a public option and embrace Medicare for all, especially in a pandemic? Extend his ban on private prison contracts to the Department of Homeland Security? Agree to lift former President Donald Trump's sanctions on Iran in order to revive the 2015 nuclear deal? Yes, yes, and yes. Was it a mistake for him to explicitly promise that $2,000 checks will go out the door, but then include only $1,400 checks in his relief bill? Definitely. Yeah, we talked about that. Nevertheless, we cannot afford to lose sight of the big picture. Now is a moment for the left to be emboldened, not embittered. As Representative Ilhan Omar tweeted last week, as progressives, it is easy to become jaded about the possibility of meaningful change. But in just the first week, the Biden administration has acted on many of progressives' top asks. Forget 100 days. Biden's first 10 days look more like the fulfillment of a progressive wish list than a great centrist betrayal. Neither Bill Clinton nor Obama began their presidencies with such energy or ambition. Neither appointed a chief of staff like Klain, who has won plaudits from prominent progressives, understands the Democratic Party has shifted in a progressive direction, and is unashamed to work with the grassroots left. Progressives are beginning to be heard. Waleed Saeed, a spokesperson for the influential left-wing group Justice Democrats, told me. The Biden administration, he added, has taken major steps forward in beginning to tackle the magnitude of the climate crisis and decades of wage stagnation. And I'll jump in here to say that in almost every announcement of every new executive order or every policy initiative, he's making good on this promise of comprehensively including racism, climate change, economic justice. These great overarching issues that intertwine and overlap into all of the issues. That general philosophy is being adhered to, and it's being recognized in almost every announcement. And I think that's fantastic. There's a big picture recognition of the interdependence of these important issues, even as they talk about more detailed initiatives. This is something I'm loving about the first couple of weeks. And here's how Hassan closes. To be clear, it might sound like I drank the Kool-Aid, but I'm far from naive. I am well aware of the fact that Biden is not Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. I have called on the media to hold this administration to account, and I have no doubt whatsoever that one day soon Biden and company will deeply disappoint me. That day, however, is not today. That is exactly right. That is exactly how I feel about it. And Mehdi Hasan, MSNBC opinion columnist, has written just a great little piece here. And I'll tell you again, it's chock full of links if you want to go into detail about any of it. And I want you to go to my Facebook page and read this. It's just the best. Okay, fellow lefties, everybody breathe. I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.